Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. The first time Evelyn heard the creek, she thought it was whispering her name. It was only a murmur at first, soft, low, almost apologetic, but the sound followed her long after she'd left the water's edge. The move to Blackwood Creek wasn't her choice. She'd been dragged along by her older brother Marcus, who insisted the quiet, remote town would help them start fresh after the accident. Their parents' deaths still sat between them like an open wound, and Marcus seemed to think a crumbling old farmhouse miles from the nearest neighbor was exactly what they needed. The farmhouse was older than it looked from the road. Every board groaned beneath their feet, the wallpaper peeled like old skin, and the windows rattled in their frames with even the gentlest wind. But it was the creek that unnerved Evelyn most. It wound behind the house like a dark ribbon, vanishing into a thick, gnarled forest that locals simply called the Hollow. On their first night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She wandered to the kitchen for water and saw Marcus at the window, staring into the trees. "You see something?" she asked. He jumped, clearly startled. "No, just the water's loud tonight." But when Evelyn stood beside him, she heard nothing but the faint rustle of leaves. The next morning, a neighbor stopped by, an elderly woman named Mrs. Whitlow, her hair as white as frost. She brought them a pie and a warning. "You keep away from that creek at night," she said, her cloudy eyes fixed on Evelyn. "And don't follow the voices, no matter what they promise you." Evelyn laughed uncomfortably, waiting for Marcus to joke about eccentric small-town superstitions. But he didn't. He just stared at the old woman like he already knew exactly what she meant. That night, the whispering came again. Evelyn lay in bed, heart pounding, the sound curling in through the open window. It wasn't just her name this time. It was phrases she couldn't quite make out, beckoning her closer. Against her better judgment, she crept downstairs, pulled on her boots, and stepped outside. The moon was high and thin, casting the world in cold silver light. The grass was wet beneath her feet as she followed the sound to the creek's edge. The water glistened black, moving slower than it should have been, and in its surface she saw shapes, faces, drifting just below, their eyes open, lips moving soundlessly. A sudden hand clamped on her shoulder. She spun to see Marcus, his expression wild. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. I heard," she started, but he shook his head violently. "No, you didn't hear anything. You don't listen to it, ever." When they went back inside, Evelyn noticed the strange marks on Marcus's forearm, thin, wet streaks as if something had tried to grab him from the water. That was the first night. The next night, the creek started calling louder. By the second night, the whispering wasn't content to drift faintly through the air. It pressed against Evelyn's skull like the weight of an oncoming storm. She tried to drown it out with music, with slamming windows shut, but the voices seemed to seep through the walls. Marcus kept himself busy, fixing creaky steps and replacing light bulbs that burned out far too quickly. But Evelyn noticed how often he glanced toward the back door, as if expecting someone, or something, to be there. Around midnight, she woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall. Not Marcus's heavy tread. These were light, hesitant, almost dragging. She sat up, listening, her heart thudding. They stopped right outside her bedroom door. The doorknob turned. She froze. The door opened just enough for her to see a pale hand curl around the edge. Its fingers were too long, the nails dark, as though waterlogged. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She reached for the lamp, but when the light flared, the door was swinging shut again, slowly, silently. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. In the morning, she found Marcus outside, stacking firewood. He had dark circles under his eyes, and when she told him about the footsteps, he didn't act surprised. He just muttered, "It's starting sooner than I thought." "What is?" she demanded, her voice sharper than intended. He looked at her, jaw tight. "I should have told you before we moved here. The creek, it's not just water. It's old. Older than this town. It doesn't like being ignored." Evelyn tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out hollow. "You're saying the water is… what? Alive?" "I'm saying," Marcus said, lowering his voice, "that the hollow takes people, and sometimes it sends something back in their place." That afternoon, Mrs. Whitlow returned. She didn't knock, just let herself in with a tin of cookies, glancing nervously at the windows. "You hear it yet?" she asked Evelyn. Evelyn hesitated. "Yes." "Then you've been chosen." The old woman set the tin on the counter and leaned close enough that Evelyn could smell the mothballs in her coat. "Don't go near it on the third night, no matter what it shows you." That night was worse. The voices didn't just call, they begged, cried, laughed. She could almost make out words. "Come see, it's beautiful here. They're waiting for you." And just before she fell into a fitful sleep, she thought she heard her mother's voice, clear as if she were standing in the room. "Evelyn, please, help us." When she sat up, the window was open. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and something else, something metallic, and the creak was louder than ever. By the time dawn broke, Evelyn's nerves were raw. She sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, watching the trees beyond the creek sway gently in the wind. Marcus shuffled in, his hair sticking up in every direction, and poured himself a cup without a word. "You didn't hear it?" she asked. "I always hear it," he said flatly, not meeting her eyes. She wanted to press him, but the look on his face warned her off. Instead, she asked, "What did Mrs. Whitlow mean? Chosen?" Marcus's grip on his mug tightened until his knuckles went white. "The hollow. It wants certain people. I don't know how it picks them. Sometimes it's kids. Sometimes it's someone who's lost too much already. It starts with the voices, then the dreams, and then…" He stopped, swallowing hard. "And then what?" "They disappear," he said finally, his voice little more than a whisper. "Or they change, and no one ever talks about it." That afternoon, Evelyn tried to keep herself busy. She unpacked boxes, scrubbed the stubborn grime from the kitchen tiles, and did her best to ignore the pull of the water. But every time she passed a window, she swore she saw movement along the creek, shadows, pacing, watching. At dusk, Marcus locked every door and window. "Third night's the worst," he muttered. "If we make it past tonight, you might be okay." But as darkness fell, the air in the house grew heavy, damp, as if the creek had crept inside. Evelyn could smell it now, mud, moss, and that faint metallic tang. The voices were stronger than ever, and she recognized them all. Her mother, her father, even her best friend from college who had drowned last year. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the words still came. "We're here, Evelyn. Just step outside, you'll see us." The knock at the front door nearly stopped her heart. Marcus moved fast, blocking her path. "Don't open it," he said sharply. "It could be Mrs. Whitlow," Evelyn whispered. "It's not." The knock came again, soft, patient, then a voice. "Evie, sweetheart, it's Dad." "Let us in." Tears blurred her vision. The voice was perfect, every cadence, every warm note. "It sounds like them," she choked out. "It's not them," Marcus said, his eyes fierce. "Whatever's out there wears their voices like a mask." But when the doorknob began to turn on its own, Evelyn's will began to crack. The urge to see her parents, the urge to see her mother, the urge to see her home, it all came back. She felt it, 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 felt it to know, was stronger than fear. The lock clicked. The door creaked open no more than an inch, just enough for the night air to slither in. Cool, damp, smelling of wet leaves and rot. Evelyn's breath caught. Through the narrow gap she saw darkness, but not the kind you could step into. This was a thick, living black, shifting and pulsing as though it had a heartbeat. And within it, shapes began to emerge. 2 figures, standing impossibly still. "Evie," her mother's voice said again. But this time there was something wrong in it. An echo, like the words were bouncing around inside a hollow space before reaching her ears. Marcus slammed his shoulder into the door, shoving it shut so hard the frame rattled. He twisted the lock, then shoved the heavy hall table against it for good measure. "You almost let it in," he said, breathless. "I saw them," Evelyn began. "You saw what it wanted you to see," Marcus snapped. "That's how it works. It gives you exactly what you want most, and once you take the step toward it, you're gone." The rest of the night was a siege. The knocks came from every door, every window. Sometimes soft, sometimes a pounding that made the glass shiver. The voices shifted constantly. Friends, relatives, strangers who whispered promises she didn't understand. Around 3 in the morning, the sound changed. It wasn't knocking anymore. It was scraping, a slow drag of something sharp against the siding of the house, circling. Evelyn gripped a kitchen knife, even though she knew it would be useless. Marcus stayed awake with her, his eyes red-rimmed. "Don't look out there," he warned. "No matter what you hear, that's the last trick it has left." But the thing about telling someone not to look is that it plants the seed. And when she heard her father sobbing outside the window, broken, desperate, Evelyn's resolve wavered. She stood, stepped toward the glass. Just a quick glance, she told herself, just to prove it's not real. Her breath fogged the pain as she leaned close. The figure outside was her father, drenched, his clothes clinging to his body like he'd been pulled from the depths of the creek. His eyes were wrong, too dark, too wide, but his mouth moved, shaping the words she'd longed to hear. "We can take you to them, sweetheart. All you have to do is follow." When she blinked, the face was right against the glass. Evelyn staggered back, her chair tipping over and clattering to the floor. The thing outside didn't flinch. It just pressed its pale, sodden hands against the window pane, the skin stretching too thin over the knuckles, nails cracked and blackened. Marcus was there in an instant, yanking her away from the glass. "Don't look!" he barked, shoving the curtain shut with a roughness that startled her. "It looked like Dad," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "It was Dad." Marcus's hands tightened on her shoulders. "If you believe that, you're already halfway gone." The words lodged in her chest like splinters. She wanted to argue, but deep down she knew. There had been something in those eyes that didn't belong to her father. Something ancient. Hungry. For the rest of the night they huddled in the living room, a single lamp casting a fragile circle of light. The voices didn't stop, but they changed tone. Less coaxing now, more frustrated. Angry. By dawn, the air in the house was dry again, the heaviness gone. Evelyn could hear birds outside, as if the hollow had retreated for now. Marcus finally spoke. "It'll try again. Maybe not tonight, maybe not for weeks, but once it marks you, it doesn't stop until it gets what it wants." Evelyn stared at him, realization dawning. "You've been through this before." His silence was answer enough. "Marcus," she said, her voice low, "is that why we moved here? Because it already marked you?" He didn't meet her eyes. "It's been following me for years. I thought if I came back here, back to where it started, I could end it. But I didn't know it would notice you too." Her stomach turned cold. "What happens if it gets us?" Marcus's gaze was distant, fixed on some memory she couldn't see. "No one really knows, but the people it takes, they're not people anymore. And sometimes they come back. Not for long. Not the same. Outside, the creek murmured faintly, almost like laughter. That night, Evelyn dreamed of standing in its black water, the surface smooth as glass. Something held her wrists, gently but firmly, and a voice whispered in her ear, "We'll wait as long as we have to." Evelyn woke with her sheets damp and cold, the echo of the whisper still curling in her ears. Her first thought was that she'd been sleepwalking, but the latch on her bedroom window was undone, and muddy streaks marred the sill. She found Marcus in the kitchen, already dressed, his coat hanging off one arm. "We're going into town," he said. "Why?" "Because we need help, and there's only one person who survived the Hollow's call for longer than a season." They drove into Blackwood Creek's center, if you could call it that. A stretch of weathered storefronts, a single gas station, and a diner with a faded sign reading Ellie's Place. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried eggs. Marcus scanned the booths until his gaze settled on a man sitting alone in the far corner. He was gaunt, his skin the color of old parchment, eyes sharp and restless. A deep scar carved down his cheek. When Marcus slid into the booth across from him, Evelyn followed reluctantly. "This is Aaron Cole," Marcus said. "He used to live by the Hollow." Made it out. Aaron's eyes flicked to her, and for a moment she swore he was counting something. Breaths, heartbeats, the seconds until she spoke. "You've heard it already," he said, not a question. Evelyn nodded. "Then you've got two options," he said, leaning back. "Run. Or tie yourself to this place until it forgets your name." "It doesn't forget," Marcus muttered. Aaron's lips twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "No, but sometimes it gets distracted. There are ways to keep it busy." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, bone-handled knife, its blade stained dark with something that wasn't rust. "You want to last. You give it something else to chase. A diversion. But the cost." He didn't finish, but Evelyn felt it in her bones. When they left the diner, the sun was already low, the shadows long and cold. Marcus's grip on the steering wheel was tight. "We're not doing what he said," he told her. "Why not?" she asked. "Because I know what kind of diversion the Hollow wants, and we're not giving it to anyone else." That night, the voices came back with new urgency. Evelyn could hear them in every corner of the house, whispering through the vents, slipping beneath the doors. And somewhere in the midst of it, she heard Aaron Cole's voice, faint, desperate. "It's already inside." Evelyn sat bolt upright, the shadows in her room seeming thicker than before. The house was silent except for the whisper of the wind outside, yet Aaron's words still lingered in her mind like the aftertaste of something bitter. She got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards groaned softly under her feet, but there was another sound beneath it, something slow, deliberate. Footsteps. "Marcus," she called. No answer. She followed the sound toward the living room, her pulse quickening. Moonlight spilled through the front windows, silvering the furniture. At first glance, the room was empty, until she saw it. A figure was standing in the far corner, so still it almost blended into the dark. It was tall, with water dripping steadily from its clothes, pooling on the floor in a widening stain. Its head tilted toward her, and though she couldn't see its face clearly, she felt the weight of its gaze. It stepped forward, and the floorboards didn't creak under its feet. Evelyn stumbled back. "Marcus!" she shouted. From the hallway came the slam of a door. Then Marcus appeared, breathless and holding the kitchen knife. His eyes flicked to the corner, only to find it empty. "What did you see?" he demanded. She told him, her words tumbling over each other, but Marcus just shook his head. "It's testing you. The more you react, the more it knows where to press." She wanted to ask, press for what, but then the smell hit her. Wet soil, moss, and that same metallic tang that seemed to haunt every encounter. When she looked down, she saw that the wet footprint it had left behind was still there, and the water in it was slowly seeping into the wood, darkening it as if the house itself were drinking it in. Marcus followed her gaze. His face went pale. "We need to seal the house." "How?" "Salt," he said, already moving toward the pantry. "Windows, doors, every threshold. It can't cross if we mark them." They worked in silence, the scrape of salt against wood and glass the only sound. But halfway through, Evelyn heard something, a faint knocking. It wasn't at the door. It was coming from inside the walls, and this time the voice that followed was her own. The sound of her own voice leaking from the walls froze her mid-step. It was uncanny, not a perfect match, but close enough to make her skin crawl. "Marcus, help me. Please, it's so dark in here." Her head snapped toward the sound. It came from the far wall near the dining room, just behind the old oak cabinet. The voice called again, this time weaker, more desperate. Marcus set the salt down slowly. "Don't answer it." "It's me," Evelyn whispered, not sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. "No," Marcus said sharply. "It sounds like you. That's different." But as the voice grew fainter, an ache bloomed in her chest. It wasn't just hearing herself, it was hearing the fear in that voice, the loneliness. She took a step toward the cabinet. Marcus moved to block her path. "Evie, listen to me. Whatever's in there isn't you. It wants you to believe it so you'll go to it." Before she could reply, the voice changed. It wasn't her anymore. It was her mother again, but muffled, as if she were speaking through water. "Evelyn, please. I can't hold on much longer." Something inside Evelyn cracked. She shoved past Marcus, hands gripping the cabinet's edge. She pulled it away from the wall with a strength born from panic, revealing a jagged hole in the plaster, just big enough for a person to crawl through. Cold air rushed out, smelling of earth and stagnant water. And somewhere deep in the darkness beyond, something moved. She leaned closer, her breath quickening. For a moment, she swore she saw a pale hand reaching toward her. Marcus yanked her back so hard she nearly fell. "That's enough," he snapped, shoving the cabinet back into place and dumping a thick line of salt across the base. Evelyn's pulse thundered in her ears. "Marcus, it was her." "It wasn't," he said, voice shaking despite his certainty. "And if you keep listening, it's going to find a way to make you follow it. That's how it works." But that night, long after Marcus had fallen asleep in the chair by the front door, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Because deep down, she wasn't sure he was right, and worse, she wasn't sure she cared. The following morning was thick with fog, the kind that made the trees beyond the creek look like they were leaning closer. Evelyn stood at the back window, her coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the pale blur of the water's surface. Something about the silence unsettled her. The voices were gone. No whispers, no cries. The absence was heavier than the noise had ever been. Marcus came in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "It's quiet," he said, and the words didn't sound like relief. They sounded like a warning. "What does that mean?" Evelyn asked. He hesitated. "It's waiting." They went about their morning with the dull tension of people expecting a storm. Marcus checked the salt lines twice, tightened the locks, kept glancing at the clock as though time might give him an answer. Evelyn tried to distract herself with chores, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the hole behind the cabinet. Around noon, someone knocked at the door. Marcus froze mid-step. "Don't," he said, but Evelyn was already moving toward it. The knock came again, 3 slow raps followed by silence. She pressed her ear to the wood. "Who is it?" For a long moment, nothing. Then, "It's Aaron Cole." Evelyn glanced at Marcus. He looked skeptical, but not alarmed. He slid the table away from the door, undid the lock, and pulled it open. Aaron stood there, dripping wet. His clothes clung to him, his boots leaving dark prints on the porch. His eyes, sharp in the diner, now seemed dulled, almost glassy. "Had to warn you," he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "You've got no time left. It's moving now." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean, moving?" Aaron's gaze flicked to Evelyn. "It doesn't just call, it hunts. You've resisted too long, so it's coming for you in the flesh." Evelyn swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Aaron leaned in, his voice low. "You run, tonight, before the moon's up. Don't look back." But when Evelyn's eyes fell to his boots, her blood went cold. The water dripping from them wasn't clear. It was black, the same shade as the creek at night. And when he smiled, it was too wide. Evelyn stepped back instinctively, her shoulder bumping against the wall. The air around Aaron seemed colder now, heavy with the smell of wet stone and decay. Marcus noticed it too. His hand slid toward the knife on the counter. "You're not Aaron," he said quietly. The smile stayed fixed, unnatural. "Close enough," the thing replied, though the voice was layered. Aaron's tone stretched over something deeper, older, like two voices speaking at once. Evelyn's pulse thudded in her ears. "Why are you here?" The thing tilted its head. "To save you the trouble of coming to me." Without warning, it stepped forward. The salt line at the threshold hissed as the black water from its boots touched it, steam curling upward. The smell was sharp, like burning metal. Marcus grabbed Evelyn's arm and yanked her toward the back door. "Go!" They bolted through the kitchen, out into the cold, damp air. The fog was thicker now, curling around them like fingers. Behind them, something slammed into the front door with enough force to shake the house. "Where are we going?" Evelyn gasped. "The old mill," Marcus shouted over his shoulder. "It's the only place it can't follow." They ran along the edge of the creek, the water eerily still beside them. No ripples, no sound, just a black mirror stretching into the trees. Evelyn couldn't help but glance at it, and for a split second she saw faces beneath the surface, staring up at her. She stumbled and Marcus caught her before she fell in. "Don't look!" he barked, his grip bruising. The mill loomed out of the fog ahead, half collapsed, its wooden beams rotted and sagging. They ducked inside, the smell of mold and rust filling their lungs. Only when Marcus slid a heavy board across the entrance did they stop to breathe. Evelyn leaned against the wall, her chest heaving. "Why can't it come in here?" "Something happened here," Marcus said, eyes scanning the shadows. "A long time ago. A fire. People say the hollow can't cross where it's been burned." Outside, the fog shifted, and from somewhere far too close, Aaron's voice called, "You can't hide forever." The voice seeped through the rotting walls like smoke, curling around them in the stale air of the mill. Evelyn felt it in her chest more than she heard it, like a vibration in her bones. Marcus motioned for her to stay quiet. He crept to a narrow crack in the wall, peering outside, his jaw clenched. "It's just standing there," he whispered, "at the tree line, watching." Evelyn edged closer, careful not to make the boards creak. Through the split in the wood, she saw the shape. It looked like Aaron again, but the posture was wrong. Too still. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes catching what little light there was and reflecting it back like an animal's. She swallowed hard. "How long do we stay here?" Marcus didn't answer right away. "Until it stops waiting," he said finally, "but that could be hours. Days." A shiver ran down her spine. "It won't just leave." "No," Marcus said grimly. "It'll try to pull us out." The thing began to move then, slow and deliberate, pacing along the edge of the field. Every few steps it stopped and turned toward the creek, as if listening. And then it called out, not in Aaron's voice this time, but in Evelyn's mother's, perfect and warm. Evie, it's okay now. We can go home. The words landed like a knife between her ribs. She turned away, pressing her hands to her ears, but the voice was inside her head now, echoing against the walls of her thoughts. You hear it too, don't you? She whispered. Marcus nodded once, his eyes dark. It's getting stronger. That's bad. Evelyn hugged herself, trying to focus on the smell of burnt wood in the mill, on the way the air here seemed heavier, like it was pressing back against the thing outside. But then she heard something new, a faint splash from the creek, followed by another, closer. She glanced at Marcus, but he was already moving toward the boarded-up window on the other side. He froze, staring out. What is it? She asked. His voice was low, tight. It's not alone anymore. Evelyn joined him at the window, her breath catching when she saw the movement in the fog. Figures, 3, 4, maybe more, were emerging from the direction of the creek, their outlines blurred but unmistakably human-shaped. Each one dripped steadily, the sound of water hitting the ground unnervingly loud in the otherwise still air. They gathered near the first figure, the one wearing Aaron's face. For a long moment they all stood there, perfectly still, their heads tilted in the same unnatural angle. Then, in eerie unison, they turned toward the mill. Evelyn's stomach twisted. What do they want? Marcus's eyes didn't leave the group. You. Her mouth went dry. Why me? It doesn't need a reason, he said grimly. The Hollow doesn't think like we do. It hungers. And when it sets its sights on someone, it keeps coming until... A sharp crack cut him off. One of the figures had stepped forward, pressing its hand flat against the air just outside the mill's threshold. There was a hiss, like steam on hot metal, followed by the sickening smell of burned flesh. The thing didn't flinch. Evelyn backed away, her pulse hammering. You said they can't cross burned ground. They can't, Marcus said, but there was no conviction in his tone now. The figures began to circle the mill, their wet footsteps sloshing in the dirt. Every so often one would stop and lean close to the wall, whispering words too faint to catch. Evelyn had the sickening feeling they were mapping the building, testing for weaknesses. Then came the pounding. It started at the back wall, slow and rhythmic, then spread, front, sides, roof, until it sounded like the entire structure was surrounded by fists made of stone. The boards rattled in their frames, dust sifting down from the rafters. Marcus grabbed Evelyn's arm, pulling her toward the center of the room. Stay away from the walls. What if they get in? She asked, her voice breaking. He met her gaze, his expression deadly serious. Then we run for the creek. Her breath caught. That's suicide. Marcus didn't disagree. The pounding stopped all at once, leaving a silence so abrupt it rang in Evelyn's ears. The fog outside pressed against the mill's cracked windows like a living thing, dense and shifting. Marcus kept his grip on her arm. This is the part I hate most, he murmured. What part? When it gets quiet, he said, his gaze darting upward, means they've changed tactics. A faint scratching began above them, light and quick, like nails against old wood. Evelyn tilted her head back. The rafters disappeared into shadow, but she could hear movement, something crawling, its weight shifting across the beams. They're on the roof, she whispered. Marcus was already moving, scanning the corners for anything they could use to reinforce the center of the room. Keep your eyes on the floor. If they get a hand in, a splintering crack cut him off. Dust rained down as one of the roof boards bowed inward. Evelyn caught a glimpse of slick, pallid fingers curling through the gap before Marcus shoved her back. He grabbed an old metal pole from a pile of scrap and jammed it upward, striking the hand. The thing let out a sound like water rushing through a narrow pipe. No breath, just movement, and withdrew. The silence returned, but Evelyn could still hear them shifting up there, circling like restless animals. Then, from the far wall came a voice. Her own again, but distorted, stretched thin like fabric about to tear. "Marcus is lying to you. He's the reason it knows your name." Evelyn froze. "Marcus, don't listen to it," he said quickly, his tone too sharp, too fast. Her pulse pounded. "Is it true?" "Evie." He hesitated just a second too long. The thing above them moved faster now, the boards creaking under its weight. Evelyn's chest tightened, her thoughts tangling. If Marcus had led it to her, then this nightmare wasn't an accident. Before she could ask again, a loud, wet slap came from the boarded entrance, followed by a long, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the threshold. The boards groaned in protest. Marcus tightened his grip on the pole. They found a way in. The dragging stopped, and for a moment Evelyn thought maybe it had been a bluff, another trick to keep them rattled. But then the lowest board on the entrance shuddered and split with a wet crack. Through the gap slid an arm, thin, glistening, the skin gray and swollen like it had been submerged for days. The fingers were too long, the nails black and curling, scraping against the mill's floor as they searched blindly for purchase. Marcus swung the pole down hard, the metal connecting with a sickening thunk. The arm withdrew, leaving behind a smear of water, so dark it looked like ink. But the damage was done. The gap was wide enough for more to follow. Two hands pushed through this time, forcing the opening wider. Then a face appeared in the space between the boards, pressed so close Evelyn could see the water dripping from its lashes. It wasn't Erin now, or her mother, or anyone she knew. It was something she couldn't name. Eyes too deep set, skin stretched taut over sharp bones, and a mouth that widened into a grin far beyond anything human. Marcus thrust the pole toward it, but the thing caught the metal mid-swing. The hiss of contact burned the air, and steam rose where its grip met the steel. Slowly, deliberately, it began to pull the pole out of Marcus's hands. "Let go!" Marcus barked. Evelyn obeyed before she even realized what he meant, and they both stumbled backward, retreating toward the center of the mill. The thing slid the pole through the gap and tossed it aside with a clatter. The pounding resumed. Walls, roof, door, all at once, like they'd decided to tear the place down piece by piece. Dust filled the air, and Evelyn's lungs burned with every breath. "We can't stay here," Marcus said over the noise. "Then where?" The roof above them groaned, and a jagged hole ripped open. Cold, damp air rushed in, carrying the scent of the creek. Something leaned over the gap, its dripping fingers brushing the floor just a few feet away from her. Marcus grabbed her hand. "We run. Now." And before she could think, they were sprinting toward the back exit, straight toward the wall of fog. The fog swallowed them whole the moment they stepped outside. It was thick enough to bead on Evelyn's skin, clinging cold and damp to her hair and lashes. She could barely see Marcus's silhouette a few feet ahead, his grip on her hand the only tether keeping her from losing him. Behind them, the mill roared with the sound of breaking wood, boards snapping, beams collapsing. The pounding had turned into something more primal. Splashes, dragging steps, the guttural rush of water spilling where no water should be. "This way!" Marcus shouted, veering left toward the creek. Evelyn's heart seized. "You said not to go near it." "I know," he snapped, breath ragged. "But the only place worse than the creek right now is behind us." The ground sloped downward, the fog thinning just enough for the black gleam of water to emerge ahead. The creek was silent, unnaturally so, its surface smooth as polished stone. Marcus slowed as they reached the edge, his eyes darting along the bank. "There should be." A splash cut him off. Evelyn's head whipped toward the sound. Something pale moved beneath the surface, sliding closer without breaking the water. Her gut twisted. "Marcus." "Don't look," he said, though his own eyes were fixed on the dark shape below. The pale form shifted, rising just enough for a face to break the surface. It was Evelyn's mother again. Perfect, warm-eyed, her lips trembling in a way that made Evelyn's chest ache. "Evie," she said softly, water spilling from her mouth like a leaking vessel. "It's safe here. You'll see him again. We're all waiting." Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. The pull was physical now, an ache in her bones, urging her forward. Marcus stepped between her and the water. "You're not taking her," he snarled. The thing in the creek smiled, and the water around it began to churn. A dozen pale hands rose from the depths, reaching for the shore for them. "Run!" Marcus shouted. They tore along the bank, the fog curling tighter, the water beside them matching their pace. And just ahead, Evelyn saw it, an old stone bridge, half collapsed but still spanning the narrowest part of the creek. "Over there!" she yelled. They sprinted toward it, unaware of the figure waiting at the other end until it stepped forward. Aaron Cole, or at least, what was left of him. Aaron's skin had gone the color of wet ash, his eyes sunk deep into hollows rimmed with shadow. Water dripped steadily from his hair and sleeves, soaking the ground at his feet. But it was his smile that froze Evelyn mid-step, too wide, too still, like it had been carved into him. "You're running the wrong way," he said, his voice rippling oddly, like sound passing through deep water. "The bridge won't save you." Marcus pulled Evelyn closer to him. "Get out of our way." Aaron tilted his head. "Why keep fighting? You can't win. You know that. And she—" He fixed his gaze on Evelyn, something like hunger curling at the edges of his grin. "She's already half mine." Evelyn felt it then, a cold bloom in her chest like a shard of ice pressing into her heart. The whispering returned, louder now, clearer, threading through her mind with promises she didn't want to admit, tempted her. She shook her head hard. "I'm not going with you." Aaron took a slow step forward. "You don't have to walk. We can carry you." The creek surged on either side of the bridge, water spilling over its edges, pale shapes moving just beneath the surface. The sound of the mill collapsing echoed faintly through the fog behind them. Marcus's hand tightened on hers. "Evie, when I say run, you run for the other side. Don't look back." Aaron's grin widened. "She won't make it." Marcus moved first, shoving Evelyn to the side and swinging the broken pole he'd grabbed from the mill. It connected with Aaron's ribs in a wet, hollow thud, but Aaron barely reacted, just staggered half a step, still smiling. The water on either side began to boil with movement. Pale hands shot upward, grasping for the bridge, clawing at the crumbling stone. "Go!" Marcus roared. Evelyn bolted, the bridge shuddering under her feet as the things in the water tried to climb up. Her breath came in ragged bursts, the fog ahead thickening until she could barely see the far side. Halfway across, the cold in her chest flared sharp enough to steal her breath. She stumbled, and in the split second her balance wavered. A hand shot from the water and caught her ankle. The grip was ice cold and impossibly strong, the fingers digging into her skin through her jeans. Evelyn screamed, kicking wildly, but the thing's hand didn't loosen. It only pulled harder, dragging her toward the bridge's crumbling edge. "Evie!" Marcus's voice cut through the fame. She felt his hands clamp around her arms, yanking her back with desperate force. For a moment it became a tug of war, Marcus pulling, the thing in the water dragging downward, her body straining between them. She caught a glimpse of the hand's owner beneath the surface, a face pale and bloated, hair drifting in the current, eyes black and bottomless. With a final guttural shout, Marcus hauled her free and they both crashed to the stone. The hand slipped back into the churning dark, disappearing like it had never been there. "Get up," Marcus urged, dragging her to her feet. They sprinted the last stretch of the bridge. The far side was little more than a dirt path leading into the trees, but as they crossed the threshold, the air shifted. The pull in Evelyn's chest loosened, the whispers faltered, and for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. She staggered to a stop, bent double with exhaustion. Marcus stood beside her, chest heaving, eyes scanning the fog behind them. Aaron still stood at the other end of the bridge, a dark silhouette in the mist. He didn't follow. Instead, he tilted his head back and let out a low, resonant sound, half howl, half rushing water, that made the hairs on Evelyn's arms rise. The shapes in the creek responded, their pale forms sinking back beneath the surface. The fog seemed to retreat with them, rolling slowly away from the trees. Marcus touched her shoulder. "We have to keep moving." Evelyn straightened, legs trembling. "Where?" "There's an old hunting cabin about a mile from here. It's on high ground, dry." They set off into the woods, the crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound. Every so often, Evelyn glanced back at the bridge. Aaron was still there, watching, his smile unbroken. And just before the fog swallowed him completely, she could have sworn she heard his voice, soft, certain, and far too close. "You'll come back. They always do." The woods beyond the bridge were unnervingly still. No wind stirred the branches, no insects chirped. Just the crunch of their boots and the faint rustle of their clothes. Every step deeper into the trees felt like moving through a place that had been forgotten by the rest of the world. Marcus kept his pace brisk, scanning the shadows between the trunks. "The cabin's not far," he said, though his voice carried no comfort. "We'll stay there until I figure out the next move." Evelyn's chest still ached faintly, the echo of that cold pull lingering inside her like an aftertaste. "And what if it comes for us there?" He glanced at her but didn't slow. "It will. The goal's to make it cost too much for it to keep trying." They came to a small clearing, moonlight pooling faintly on the grass. In the center stood the cabin, lean and weather-beaten, its roof sagging under years of neglect. A padlock hung from the door, rusted but still intact. Marcus broke it open with a rock and pushed the door inward. The air inside was thick with dust, but it was dry and the walls were solid. A stone fireplace took up most of one wall, a scattering of old hunting gear hanging from hooks above it. Evelyn sank into a rickety chair, her legs weak. "Do you really think this place will keep it out?" "For a while," Marcus said, dropping his pack by the door. "But we can't stay still too long." She wanted to press him, to make him explain exactly what too long meant, but before she could, something hit the roof. Not hard, just a soft, wet thump, followed by the slow drag of something heavy moving across the shingles. Evelyn's breath caught. "It's here already." Marcus crossed to the fireplace, grabbing an old axe from the wall. "No," he said, his voice low. "That's not it." Another thump, this one closer to the edge of the roof. Evelyn stood, every muscle tense. "Then what is it?" Marcus didn't answer right away. His eyes tracked the sound, his grip tightening on the axe handle. Finally, he said, "It's what comes before it." The dragging on the roof grew slower, more deliberate, as if whatever was up there was circling, testing the weight of each step. Dust sifted from the ceiling beams with every movement, catching in the pale light of the moon seeping through the cracks. Evelyn's skin prickled. "What do you mean, before it?" Marcus didn't take his eyes from the roof. "The hollow doesn't just arrive. It sends something ahead, a scout, something smaller but faster. It finds the weak spots, opens the door for the rest." As if in response, a sharp tap, tap, tap began near the chimney, like claws on stone. Evelyn edged toward the window, careful not to make a sound. She could see only the tops of the trees swaying faintly in the darkness, but then a shadow swept across the moonlight. Quick, skittering. The sound shifted, moving toward the front of the cabin. Marcus motioned for her to stay back as he eased the door open a crack. In the thin slice of view, Evelyn caught a glimpse of it. At first, she thought it was a dog, small, hunched, with limbs too long for its body. But its skin was bare and slick, gleaming like wet stone, and its head was wrong. Too round, with eyes that bulged and reflected light like coins at the bottom of a well. It sniffed the air, turning slowly toward the door. Marcus slammed it shut. "Stay away from the windows," he hissed. The tap, tap, tap returned, this time on the walls, moving faster. Then something scraped hard against the wood, a high, nails-on-glass sound that set Evelyn's teeth on edge. Her pulse hammered. "If that's just the scout," Marcus cut her off, "then we've got minutes, maybe less." The scraping stopped, silence stretched, thick and unnatural. Evelyn felt it in her bones. Whatever was out there was still there, waiting. Then, in the deepest corner of the room, the floorboards creaked. Evelyn's head whipped toward the sound. The corner was swallowed in shadow, but she swore she saw movement, a faint shifting, like something unfolding itself slowly from the darkness. Marcus raised the axe. "Stay behind me." The shape emerged inch by inch, too low to the ground at first, then rising until it was nearly her height. It had no business fitting inside that corner. Its body seemed to bend in ways bones shouldn't allow. Its skin glistened as though still dripping from the creek. Then it smiled, not with a mouth, but with a ripple across its face, stretching where a mouth should be, forming an Ausean curve that somehow conveyed hunger. Evelyn's chest tightened, and she realized with a cold clarity, this wasn't the scout. This was something worse. Marcus lunged forward, swinging the axe. The blade sank into its shoulder with a wet thunk, but instead of recoiling, it leaned into the strike, its strange knot mouth widening as a sound poured out, a wet, gurgling laugh. It moved faster than she thought possible, grabbing the axe handle and yanking Marcus toward it. He twisted free, but not before the thing's other hand grazed his sleeve, leaving behind a smear of that same dark, oily water. "Evie!" "The door!" Marcus barked. She bolted for it, yanking it open to a blast of cold, damp air. The forest outside was cloaked in fog again, thicker than before. She hesitated. Stepping into that was its own kind of death. But the sound of the thing's wet feet slapping against the cabin floor shoved her forward. Marcus was right behind her, slamming the door as they burst out into the night. They ran, the fog swallowing them almost instantly, branches clawing at their clothes. Behind them, the cabin groaned. Then a sharp crack split the air, as if the walls themselves had given way. Evelyn risked a glance over her shoulder. Through the swirling mist, she saw the dark outline of the cabin collapsing in on itself. And just beyond it, in the direction of the creek, dozens of shapes were beginning to move. The shapes emerged in fragments through the fog, an arm here, the curve of a head there, each one slick and pale, their movements fluid like they'd never quite left the water. They didn't hurry. They didn't need to. The sound of their dragging steps was enough to keep Evelyn's pulse spiking. Marcus pulled her toward a narrow deer trail, forcing their pace faster. "We have to lose them before they close the gap." Evelyn's breath burned in her lungs. "Where?" "We're running straight toward the creek." "I know," Marcus said, his voice tight. "There's a crossing they can't use, not without revealing themselves for what they are." They crashed through undergrowth, the fog thinning enough for her to see glimmers of black water to their left. The creek was keeping pace with them, its surface eerily calm despite the movement of the shapes on its far side. "They're watching us," Evelyn whispered. "They've always been watching," Marcus said grimly. A branch snapped somewhere ahead and Marcus froze, throwing his arm out to stop her. From the mist, a figure stepped into the trail, tall, broad-shouldered, dripping. Evelyn's heart plummeted. It was her father. He looked exactly as he had before the accident, same heavy work jacket, same tired smile. But his eyes were wrong. Flat, glossy, reflecting light like still water. "Evie," he said, voice soft, steady. "You're cold. Let me take you home." Every muscle in her body told her to run to him, but Marcus's grip on her wrist tightened painfully. "It's not him," he murmured. Her father's expression didn't change. "You know I wouldn't lie to you." The air thickened, heavy with the scent of moss and silt. Something moved just behind him. 3 more shapes, pale hands flexing. Marcus leaned close to her ear. "On my mark, we run past him. Don't look at his face." She gave the smallest nod she could manage. 1, 2, her father's voice sharpened. "Evelyn, don't you dare leave me again." On 3, Marcus shoved her forward. They barreled past, not looking back, though she could feel her father's voice trailing after her, sinking deep into her bones like a hook. Branches whipped against her arms as they tore down the narrow trail, the fog swallowing the sound of their footsteps. But her father's voice stayed with her, threading through the trees, always just behind her ear. "You can't outrun blood, Evie." Marcus didn't slow until the trail opened into a rocky bank. The creek curved ahead, narrowing into a shallow stretch choked with jagged stones. The water here was different, faster, turbulent, foaming white over the rocks. "This is it," Marcus said, scanning the far side. "It can't cross moving water like this, not without—" A splash cut him off. Evelyn turned just in time to see a pale figure step into the current. It moved as though the water didn't exist, the current slipping around it without resistance. Marcus's face drained of color. "That's new?" The thing lifted its head, and for a split second, Evelyn's knees nearly gave way. It was her again. Not just her face, but her exact expression, down to the tightness in her jaw and the fear in her eyes. "Come here," it mouthed, the words perfectly synchronized with the real Evelyn's own breathing. She stumbled back, shaking her head. "Marcus, it's—" "I see it," he said sharply. "Keep moving." They skirted the bank, but the double matched their pace, walking easily through the current. More shapes appeared behind it, stepping into the rushing water as though it were no barrier at all. The wind shifted, and with it came the smell, wrought and iron, thick enough to taste. Evelyn's double tilted its head. "They're almost here," it said, and this time the voice came from her own mouth. Her throat tightened, panic rising. "Marcus!" He grabbed her hand and yanked her into the trees again. "We're not making the cabin. We need somewhere else. Anywhere else." The forest closed around them once more, the fog deepening. Evelyn could hear the water's roar fading behind them, but another sound took its place. Soft, deliberate footsteps, too many to count, moving in perfect unison. And then, from somewhere ahead, a single voice called out, one she hadn't heard in years. "Evie?" It was her brother, the other one, the one who had died when she was 12. Evelyn's legs locked mid-step. The voice was clear, warm, and impossibly familiar, pulling at a part of her she'd buried deep. "Evie, it's me. It's Daniel." She could see him now, stepping through the mist as if it parted just for him. Same crooked smile, same dark hair falling into his eyes the way it used to when he teased her. But Daniel had been gone for 15 years, pulled under the river in a flash flood. They'd never even found his body. Marcus caught her hesitation and moved in front of her, blocking her view. "Don't," he warned. "That's not him." Daniel's smile didn't falter. "It is, and you know it." His gaze flicked to Marcus. "Ask him how he knows the hollow." Ask him what he traded to keep himself alive this long. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's trying to turn you against me." Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. "Is it lying?" He didn't answer. Daniel took a step closer, his feet making no sound on the forest floor. "He brought you here, Evie. You think that was an accident? You think the hollow didn't make him?" Evelyn's chest constricted. "Marcus." "Don't listen to it," Marcus snapped. His hand closed around hers again, but she could feel the tremor in his grip. Daniel's voice softened, almost pleading. "It's been so long. Come with me. You'll see Mom, Dad, everyone. We can be together again. No more running, no more fear." The trees seemed to bend inward, shadows thickening around them. Somewhere beyond, the sound of those synchronized footsteps grew louder, closer. Marcus pulled her toward a narrow cut in the trees. "Move!" They ran, but the forest didn't feel like it was letting them go. The fog thickened into walls, branches clawed at their clothes, and every few steps, Evelyn swore she saw Daniel's figure slipping between the trees. Always just ahead, always waiting. When they broke into another clearing, Evelyn stopped cold. The creek was there again. And this time, it wasn't silent. It was singing. The song rose from the water like mist, low, melodic, and so beautiful it hurt to hear. It wasn't words, but something older, winding through her ribs and curling into her spine. Every note pulled at her, each one making it harder to remember why she should stay on the bank. Evelyn stepped forward without realizing, the grass cold and wet beneath her boots. Marcus caught her arm. "Don't listen." His voice was sharp, but the strain in it told her he was hearing it too. The water glimmered in the dim light, a strange, shifting silver. Beneath the surface, shapes moved slowly, their outlines swaying like dancers. The song swelled, and with it came images in Evelyn's mind. Her parents waving from a warm kitchen, Daniel laughing beside her in the sun, a world where nothing had been lost. "I could go," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I could see them again." Marcus turned her to face him, his grip firm. "If you step in, you won't come back, not as you." Before she could answer, the song changed. It became sharper, almost urgent, and the shapes beneath the water began to rise. The first face broke the surface. It was hers again, smiling softly. Then another. Marcus's face this time, eyes calm, lips moving in sync with the song. More followed, strangers and familiars alike, until the creek seemed crowded with pale, swaying heads, all singing together. Marcus pulled her back a step. "We can't stay here." But the bank to their left and right was no longer empty. Pale figures emerged from the fog, moving in perfect rhythm to the song. Their wet clothes clung to their frames, their eyes locked on her. Evelyn's double reached out from the water, hand dripping silver. "Just one step," it whispered, though its mouth never moved. Marcus shifted, putting himself between her and the bank. "We run on 3, he said under his breath. The song grew louder, the faces in the water leaning closer. 1, the fog closed in around them. 2, something cold brushed Evelyn's ankle. 3. They lunged toward the narrowest break in the pale figures, Marcus swinging the axe in a wide arc. The blade connected with something solid, a shoulder, a collarbone, sending one of the things staggering back with a splash of dark water. Evelyn sprinted beside him, the song clawing at her thoughts with every step. It wasn't just in her ears anymore. It was inside her skull, threading itself through memories, warping them until she wasn't sure what was real. She could still see Daniel in the periphery, smiling, beckoning her toward the water. One of the figures stepped into their path, its face wearing her mother's expression, worried, pleading. You're making a mistake, Evie. Just come home. Marcus shoved her hard to the side, breaking her line of sight. Don't look at them. Eyes forward. They crashed through the last of the fog into dense woods again, the song muffled now, but still trailing them like an echo. Evelyn's lungs burned, her legs aching with each step. But Marcus didn't slow until they reached a slope of rocky ground. The incline opened into a ledge overlooking a stretch of forest bathed in pale moonlight. Below, the trees looked strange, too still, their shadows wrong. Evelyn realized after a moment that there were no shadows. The ground was covered in a thin black film, glistening as if wet. Marcus cursed under his breath. It's spreading. She frowned. What is? The hollow, he said, scanning the horizon. It's not just the creek, it's everything it touches. It seeps out, swallows ground, and once it does... He trailed off, jaw tightening. The wind shifted, carrying with it that same metallic scent, sharp enough to sting her nose. Somewhere far below, the black film rippled, and pale shapes began to stir. Evelyn took a step back from the edge. We can't stay here. Marcus's gaze stayed fixed downward. No, but if it's already spread this far, we might be running out of places to go. The shapes below turned in unison, their faces lifting toward the ledge. Even from this distance, Evelyn felt the weight of their attention, like the moment before being pulled under cold water. And then, in a single fluid motion, they began to climb. The way they climbed made Evelyn's stomach twist. They didn't move like people. Their limbs bent at wrong angles, hands and feet digging into the rock with unnatural precision. No scrambling, no hesitation. Just smooth, relentless progress. Marcus grabbed her arm and pulled her back from the edge. We've got maybe a minute. Her eyes darted around the ridge. The ledge was narrow, hemmed in by trees on one side and the drop on the other. Where do we go? He scanned the tree line and pointed to a faint gap between two thick oaks. There's an old fear road. If we can reach it, it'll lead us to higher ground. They ran for the gap, branches whipping at their faces, the sound of climbing behind them growing louder. The fire road was little more than a dirt track overgrown with weeds, but it was wide enough to run side by side. For a few desperate seconds, Evelyn thought they might outrun them. Then came the thud of something landing in the road ahead. It was Daniel again, or at least the thing wearing his face. He stood perfectly still, blocking their path, head tilted in that same wrong angle she'd seen in all the others. You're not going to make it, he said. Marcus didn't slow. Move. Daniel's smile deepened. You'll only get tired, and when you stop, they'll take you piece by piece until nothing's left but what we need. Evelyn's chest tightened. What do you need? His eyes locked on hers, and for a moment, she thought she saw something flicker there, something vast, black and cold. Another voice for the song. The shapes from the ridge were spilling onto the fire road now, their pale skin catching the moonlight. The sound of water dripping surrounded them, though there was no water to be seen. Marcus took a step toward Daniel, tightening his grip on the axe. Evie, run past me when I swing. Daniel's smile didn't falter. You won't kill me. Not really. I'll just come back wearing someone else. The climbing shapes closed in from behind. The road ahead was a wall of fog, and the thing that looked like her brother. Marcus's knuckles whitened on the axe handle. Guess I'll just have to make it hurt then. Marcus lunged first, the axe whistling through the fig. Daniel moved in a blur, sidestepping with an almost lazy grace, but the blade still caught his shoulder. The impact tore a strip of skin, revealing not muscle or bone, but something darker, shimmering, fluid, shifting like oil in water. Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head, studying the wound with mild curiosity. You can't cut what doesn't end. Wasn't trying to, Marcus said. He pivoted and slammed his shoulder into Daniel, driving him sideways just enough to clear the path. Go, Marcus shouted. Evelyn sprinted forward, shoving past the slick, cold surface of Daniel's arm. The moment she touched him, a rush of images poured into her head, her own face, pale and still beneath the creek, her hands folded over her chest, the song thrumming in her skull. She nearly stumbled, but Marcus's hand was at her back, pushing her onward. The fog ahead thickened, swallowing the road in a gray wall. Evelyn's ears rang with the sound of the climbing shapes closing in behind them, their steps perfectly synchronized. They burst through the fog into a clearing, moonlight spilling onto a weathered structure half hidden by trees, an old ranger's tower, its ladder swaying slightly in the wind. Marcus looked up. If we get high enough, they can't reach us without showing what they really are. It'll slow them. They reached the base and Marcus shoved her toward the ladder. Climb. Evelyn grabbed the rungs, her hands slick with sweat, and began to haul herself upward. The wood creaked under her weight, but it held. Marcus followed close behind. Halfway up, she risked a glance down and froze. Daniel stood at the base, looking up at her, that same calm smile on his face. Around him, the pale shapes gathered, their heads tilted, their bodies swaying in rhythm to a sound Evelyn couldn't hear yet, but felt in her chest. Daniel called up to her, voice smooth and certain. You can't stay above the water forever. And as if to prove him right, the song began again. The song seeped into her bones before she could brace against it, low and resonant, vibrating through the wooden rungs of the ladder, humming against her palms. Each note felt like it tugged at her heartbeat, slowing it, sinking it to a rhythm that wasn't hers. Evelyn's grip faltered. Her foot slipped on the rung and she swayed backward, catching herself just in time. Evie, Marcus barked from below. Don't listen. Keep climbing. But the melody was winding through her thoughts now, warping them. She could see her parents standing at the top of the tower, smiling, hands outstretched. Daniel was beside them, his arm draped around her shoulders, like it used to be, all warmth and safety. Come on, Evie, Daniel called from below. We'll keep you safe, no more running. The air thickened, the scent of damp earth and rust rising as the pale shapes began to gather around the base of the tower, their faces lifted toward her. The song grew louder, harmonizing with itself in voices she recognized and didn't. Every friend, every lost face, weaving their tones together until she could hardly breathe without wanting to fall toward them. Marcus reached her, his hand gripping her ankle to steady her. Look at me, he ordered. She glanced down, her vision blurred with tears. I can't. Yes, you can. His voice was rough, cutting through the melody like a jagged edge. It's not them. It's never been them. It's the hollow, and it wants to hollow you out too. The song wavered for a fraction of a second, and Evelyn latched on to that gap, forcing herself upward rung by rung. They reached the platform at the top, pulling themselves into the cramped space. The wind was stronger here, carrying away some of the song's weight, but it never stopped, still curling up from below, still calling. From this height, Evelyn could see the forest for miles, or what should have been forest. Patches of the land below shimmered black, like the creek had bled into the earth, spreading outward in veins. And in the largest of those black pools, something vast moved beneath the surface. It shifted with a slow, deliberate grace, too large to see in full, just the ripple of its passage beneath the slick black sheen. Now and then, a pale curve broke the surface, something like a spine or a ridge, before sliding back under. Evelyn's stomach twisted. That's the hollow? Marcus's knuckles whitened on the rail. Not all of it. Just what it lets you see. The song swelled again, and Evelyn realized with a chill that it wasn't just coming from the figures below the tower anymore. It was resonating up from that dark expanse in the distance, a deep undercurrent that made the air vibrate. She stepped back from the edge. "Marcus, it's spreading. What happens if it reaches everywhere?" His jaw tightened. "Then there won't be anywhere to run." Below, Daniel was still standing at the base, staring up at her with that unshakable smile. The pale shapes swayed around him in perfect time to the song, their eyes reflecting the moonlight like fragments of broken glass. Evelyn forced herself to look away, scanning the horizon for any sign of safety. There, a faint orange flicker deep in the trees, miles off, a fire. "Marcus," she said quickly, "someone's out there. A camp, maybe. If fire really keeps it back." He followed her gaze, then nodded once. "If we can get to it, we might buy more than a night." The tower swayed faintly in the wind, the old wood groaning. From below came a sharp crack as something slammed against one of the ladder's supports. The structure shivered beneath their feet. "They're trying to bring it down," Marcus said. Evelyn's eyes darted to the firelight again, now barely visible through the mist. "Then we have to move before it works." Another crack, this one louder, deeper. Daniel's voice drifted up, smooth as the creek's surface on a windless night. "Jump, I'll catch you." Marcus's hand went to the axe. "We're climbing down the other side. Stay ahead of me, and don't stop for anything." The wood beneath them shuddered again. The next blow might be enough to bring the whole tower down. Marcus swung his legs over the far side of the tower, testing the ladder with a sharp tug before starting down. Evelyn followed, the rungs cold and slick under her hands. Each step down felt like a gamble. Would the old wood hold or splinter under her weight? The blows on the opposite side grew louder, the structure groaning as if in pain. The song wove around the creaks and shudders, a constant insidious thread pulling at her focus. Halfway down, a shadow peeled itself from the mist below, a figure climbing up toward them without touching the ladder. Its body pressed flat against the wood like it was part of it. Its head turned, and Evelyn saw her own face staring back at her, lips moving silently to the song. Her stomach lurched. "Marcus, I see it," he snapped, dropping the last few rungs to the ground. He swung the axe upward, the blade biting into one of its arms. Dark, viscous water spilled from the wound, hissing where it hit the wood. The thing didn't scream. It simply let go, dropping back into the fog, vanishing like it had never been there. "Go," Marcus urged, and she jumped the last 3 rungs, landing hard beside him. They bolted into the trees, heading for the faint orange glow in the distance. The pale shapes followed, but now they were faster, moving in bursts, closing the gap with unnerving ease. Evelyn's legs burned, lungs aching with each breath. The firelight flickered closer, but so did the sound of pursuit, the wet slap of feet against earth, the rustle of something brushing through the undergrowth in perfect rhythm with their steps. Then the song changed. It grew sharper, more urgent, and for the first time, Evelyn thought she could hear words inside it. Not just sounds, commands. "Stop! Wait! Look!" She stumbled, her foot catching on a root, and Marcus caught her before she fell. "Don't listen," he panted, dragging her forward. The glow ahead brightened, revealing the outline of a campfire. Around it stood 3 figures, human shapes, real ones, bundled in heavy coats. One of them turned toward the sound of their approach, but before Evelyn could call out, Marcus's grip tightened. "Wait, something's wrong." The figures didn't move closer. They just stood there, watching, as if they'd been waiting for them all along. The fire crackled, throwing long shadows across the clearing. At first glance, the figures looked human enough, faces pale in the glow, eyes fixed on Evelyn and Marcus. But there was something too still about them. No shifting of weight, no visible breath in the cold night air. Marcus slowed, his body angled slightly in front of hers. "Stay behind me," he murmured. One of the figures stepped forward, the firelight revealing more detail and more wrongness. The skin looked stretched, not wrinkled, but smoothed too tightly over the bones. The eyes caught the firelight, reflecting it like the pale shapes in the creek. Evelyn's heart sank. "They're not people." The middle figure smiled, and though the expression was warm, it didn't reach the eyes. "We've been waiting for you," it said, voice carrying the same strange resonance as Aaron's had. Marcus's jaw tightened. "We're not here for you." The figure's gaze slid to Evelyn. "No, but she is." Evelyn's chest tightened. The pull in her ribs, faint since the tower, flared sharply as though the fire's heat wasn't touching it. Marcus edged backward, pulling her with him. "We need to go." But the other two figures moved in perfect unison, stepping around the fire to block the way they'd come. Behind them, the pale shapes from the woods were spilling into the clearing, circling the perimeter like a tightening noose. Evelyn's pulse thundered. "Marcus, they're not afraid of the fire." "No," he said grimly, "because it's their fire." The lead figure's smile widened. "It's not about keeping us out, it's about bringing you in." And then, in the heart of the flames, something shifted. The fire bent inward, the orange bleeding to a deep, unnatural black that pulsed like a living thing. From within it came a familiar voice, her mother's, soft, coaxing, impossible to ignore. "Evie, come home." The voice was so clear it might as well have been whispered against Evelyn's ear. Every muscle in her body ached to step forward, to let the heat of the pure swallow the cold still clinging to her bones. Marcus's hand clamped on her arm, his grip iron. "Don't," he warned, but his voice sounded distant, muffled under the weight of her mother's call. The black heart of the fire churned, shapes moving within it, faces, hands, glimmers of places she knew could not exist anymore. She saw the kitchen from their old house lit by a warm morning sun. Daniel's laughter from somewhere upstairs. Her father at the table smiling at her the way he used to before everything fell apart. Her breath caught. "Marcus, they're in there." "They're not," he said sharply. "That's the hollow showing you what it wants you to see." The figures around the clearing began to sway, the motion perfectly matched to the rhythm of the song, which was now laced with the sound of crackling wood and faint human laughter. Evelyn's pulse thudded in her ears. "What if, just what if, it's real?" "Then they wouldn't be calling you through that," Marcus growled, nodding toward the blackened flames. The fire's pull deepened and the air around them grew heavier, damp despite the heat. The pale shapes beyond the clearing moved closer, their movements synchronized, their eyes fixed on her. The lead figure extended a hand toward the fire. "One step, Evelyn, that's all. Then you'll understand." Her feet shifted forward before she even realized she'd moved. Marcus yanked her back so hard it jarred her shoulder. "We're leaving, now." The figures blocking the path didn't move aside. Instead, they turned toward her in unison, and their smiles stretched wider than human skin should allow. The fire flared, the black center blooming outward in a sudden pulsing wave, heat and cold at once, carrying the scent of the creek. Marcus shoved her sideways, away from the blast. "Run!" They dove for the tree line, the song and the fire's hiss, chasing them into the dark. But as they ran, Evelyn heard her mother's voice again, closer this time. "Next time, Evie, you won't run." They plunged into the trees, the glow of the fire shrinking behind them until it was swallowed by the fog. The forest felt tighter now, branches crowding close, roots catching at their boots. Every shadow seemed to move. Marcus didn't slow until they reached a hollow beneath a cluster of leaning pines. He crouched low, pulling Evelyn down beside him. "We need to stay quiet," he whispered, breath ragged. "It's listening for us." Her chest was still heaving, the echo of her mother's voice looping in her head. Marcus, it knew exactly what to show me. That's what it does, he said grimly. It doesn't just take faces, it digs in until it knows what you'd trade everything for. From somewhere deep in the woods, the song swelled again, distant but deliberate, like a beacon. Evelyn couldn't tell if it was meant to guide them closer or to let something else find them. Marcus, she hesitated. When it spoke through Daniel, it said you brought me here on purpose. He went still, his jaw working. It's trying to break us apart. That's not an answer, she pressed. He didn't look at her. I thought I could end it here. I didn't know it would go after you. Evelyn's pulse quickened. You brought me here knowing it was waiting for you? I thought it was only after me, he said, his voice low but sharp. I was wrong. Before she could respond, something moved in the trees, a ripple in the fog, a faint shimmer like moonlight on water. Then a pale hand curled around the trunk of a nearby pine. Another followed. Marcus's eyes darted to hers. Don't move. The shape stepped into view. It wasn't wearing anyone's face this time. Its head was smooth, featureless, except for a mouth that opened too wide, spilling a slow stream of black water onto the ground. It crouched low, sniffing the air, then turned its head toward them. Marcus's hand tightened on hers. Run on 3. The song rose, vibrating in her ribs. 1. The thing began to crawl. 2. Its mouth split wider, impossibly wide. 3. They exploded from the hollow, boots slamming into damp earth. The thing let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, more like the rush of water through a drain, sucking the warmth from the air around them. The forest blurred past, fog tearing around their shoulders as they ducked and weaved between trunks. Behind them, the thing moved on all fours, its limbs jerking unnaturally, gaining ground with each lunge. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. It's fast, faster than the others. Evelyn's lungs burned. Then we need to be faster. They veered sharply right, crashing through a tangle of undergrowth until the ground began to slope upward. Roots knotted across the rise, las tibiae, slick with moss. Evelyn's hands scraped raw as she scrambled up, Marcus pulling her the last few feet to level ground. For a moment, she thought they'd lost it, until the slope below darkened. The thing was climbing after them, its limbs gripping the incline like hooks, pulling itself upward with horrible ease. Marcus's eyes scanned the tree line ahead. There, through the fog, a faint outline emerged, a derelict hunting blind raised a few feet off the ground on rotting stilts. Its ladder hung crooked, one rung missing. They ran for it, Evelyn's chest heaving, her legs screaming with fatigue. Marcus shoved her up the ladder first, the wood groaning under her weight. She was halfway inside when she felt it, cold, wet fingers brushing her ankle. Marcus! She gasped, kicking hard. The grip tightened, water running down her leg from where it touched her. Marcus swung the axe, the blade connecting with a dull, wet crack. The hand fell away, and Evelyn scrambled into the blind, hauling him in behind her. The thing circled below, its pale head tilting back to stare at them through the slats in the floor. The black water spilling from its mouth hissed when it touched the stilts, eating into the wood. Marcus cursed under his breath. We can't stay in here long. Evelyn's gaze locked on the widening stains where the water touched. Then where do we go when it falls? From somewhere deeper in the fog came a sound. Multiple voices, speaking in unison, growing closer. Marcus's jaw tightened. We don't wait for it to fall. We move before the others get here. Marcus leaned to the far side of the blind, peering through a warped gap in the wall. The fog was shifting there, curling in unnatural spirals, but through it he spotted a faint glow, amber, flickering. Another fire, he murmured. Evelyn's stomach clenched. Like the last one? Maybe, he said, but it's in the opposite direction of the creek. Could be a camp, could be a trap. Either way, it's our only shot. Below them, the thing scraped its claws along the stilts, peeling splinters away in slow, deliberate strips. The black water had eaten deep grooves into the wood, and Evelyn could hear it fizzing softly in the damp night air. The chorus of voices beyond the fog grew louder, closer, too many to count, layered in perfect harmony with the same cadence as the song. Every note vibrated up through the stilts, crawling into her bones. Marcus gripped the axe. When I jump, you follow. We cut wide around it and head for the glow. Don't stop. He vaulted over the side before she could argue, hitting the ground in a crouch. The thing lunged for him immediately, its limbs bending too far, but he met it with a sharp swing of the axe, driving it back just enough to clear a path. Go, he barked. Evelyn hit the ground hard, the cold seeping up through her boots. She sprinted, heart hammering, the flickering light ahead their only guide. The fog seemed to resist their movement, pressing in close, dampening sound until her own breath sounded far away. Something moved in the mist to her left, tall, human-shaped, keeping pace without effort. She didn't dare look at its face. Marcus caught up beside her, his breaths sharp and quick. Almost there. The glow grew stronger, spilling across the fog in golden streaks. But as they broke through the last line of trees, Evelyn stopped dead. The light came from a ring of torches set into the ground, perfectly spaced, each flame burning low but steady. Inside the ring stood a single figure, Mrs. Whitlow, and she was smiling like she'd been expecting them all along. Mrs. Whitlow's silhouette wavered in the torchlight, her white hair gleaming like spun frost. She stood at the exact center of the circle, hands clasped neatly in front of her, eyes fixed on Evelyn. "You made it," she said, her voice as warm and gentle as the day she'd brought them pie. "I was afraid you'd wait too long." Marcus stopped just short of the torch ring, his grip tightening on the axe. "What is this?" "A safe place," she replied. "For now." Her gaze lingered on Evelyn. "If you step inside, it can't touch you." Evelyn's eyes flicked to the torches, each one burning steady despite the damp fog. The air inside the circle seemed lighter, clearer. No trace of the cold pull that had been lodged in her chest for days. Marcus didn't move. "And the catch?" Mrs. Whitlow tilted her head, smiling faintly. "The hollow always takes its due. Better to choose what it gets than to wait for it to decide." Evelyn's pulse stumbled. "Choose? It can't cross the fire," Mrs. Whitlow explained, "but it can be fed from within. A voice, a piece of you, enough to keep it from tearing the rest away." Marcus shook his head. "No, we're not making deals with it." Mrs. Whitlow's eyes softened, almost pitying. "And if you don't, it will keep coming until it wears her down." She nodded toward Evelyn. "Until she stops running." The voices in the fog were closer now, circling the clearing just beyond the torchlight. Shapes moved there, tall, swaying, patient. The song began again, low and coaxing, winding its way into Evelyn's thoughts. Mrs. Whitlow extended her hand toward her. "One step inside, child, just one, and you'll sleep without dreams tonight." Marcus stepped in front of her. "Don't." Evelyn's body ached with exhaustion, the promise of peace tugging at her harder than she wanted to admit. The figures in the fog began to press closer, their pale faces catching the torchlight. Mrs. Whitlow's voice dropped to a whisper. "Better to give a piece than lose it all." And for the first time, Evelyn wondered if she was right. The torch flames snapped in the windless air, as if sensing the tension in Evelyn's hesitation. The clearing felt smaller with every breath, the shapes in the fog pressing in just enough for her to see the curve of shoulders, the faint gleam of wet skin. Marcus's hand was firm on her arm. "Evie, you step in there and you're theirs. Maybe not tonight, maybe not all at once, but they'll own you." Mrs. Whitlow's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Better theirs than gone entirely. You felt it, haven't you? The pull, it doesn't stop." Evelyn swallowed hard. She had felt it every moment since that first night by the creek. Even now, standing outside the circle, her bones seemed to hum with the hollow song, her breath sinking unconsciously to its rhythm. "If you go in," Marcus said, "you're giving it permission. You think you can stop at just a piece? It'll take more. It always takes more." The chorus in the fog swelled, each note drawn out like the inhale before a plunge underwater. Evelyn's knees weakened under its weight. Mrs. Whitlow took a single step closer to the edge of the circle. "You've been marked. That doesn't go away. But inside here, you can live with it. Outside." Her gaze flicked to the fog where the pale shapes swayed. "You'll last until your strength runs out, and child, you're already tired." Evelyn's eyes stung. She was tired, bone-deep tired, like the pull inside her was hollowing her out, grain by grain. Marcus squeezed her arm, grounding her. "We move now. We can lose them in the trees. You just have to choose me over them." Mrs. Whitlow's hand stayed extended, palm up. "Or choose yourself and step inside." The song in the fog shifted, threading her mother's voice through its harmony. "Evie, come home." Her heart wrenched so sharply she swayed forward a step before she caught herself. Marcus's voice cut low and urgent. "You step in there, Evie, and you won't be you anymore." Mrs. Whitlow's eyes were patient, her smile small and knowing. "Or maybe you'll finally be whole." The clearing was so quiet, Evelyn could hear the blood rushing in her ears. Even the shapes in the fog seemed to pause, as if they too were waiting for her choice. Her gaze darted between the circle's warm glow and Marcus's tense, unyielding stance. The heat from the torches looked inviting, promising, almost alive. The fog behind them was nothing but cold teeth and patience. She swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "What if I don't have the strength to keep running?" Marcus's eyes softened, but only for a breath. "Then I'll carry you, but I'm not letting them take you." Mrs. Whitlow's hand didn't waver. "And if he can't, what happens then?" The question sank deep, lodging in Evelyn's ribs like a splinter. She imagined nights spent like the last, running, hiding, the song creeping closer every time. And then she imagined stepping into that circle, the weight in her chest gone, her mind her own again. The chorus in the fog swelled, weaving in Daniel's voice now. "We could be together again. No more fear." Evelyn's body moved without her meaning it to. One step forward. Marcus's grip tightened like a vice. "Evie, look at me. Right now." She met his gaze, and for a moment the pull loosened. His voice was low, raw. "If you do this, I can't get you back." Mrs. Whitlow tilted her head, her smile widening. "Or maybe he won't have to. Maybe you won't want to come back." From the fog, something pressed closer, its pale face catching the torchlight. It wasn't her mother or Daniel or anyone she knew. It was something featureless, skin stretched smooth, no eyes, no mouth. Yet somehow she felt it smiling at her. The heat from the torches reached her skin now, mingling with the cool damp from the fog. Marcus's fingers dug into her arm. "Choose now, Evie. Them or us." And the song reached a pitch so perfect, so achingly sweet, it felt like it could split her in two. Evelyn's breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. The torchlight shimmered like water, and for a heartbeat she imagined stepping through it would feel the same, weightless, clean. as if the past few days could be washed from her entirely. Her toes brushed the edge of the circle, the warmth wrapped around her like a promise. Marcus yanked her back hard. "No!" The words snapped through the clearing like a crack of thunder. Mrs. Whitlow's smile faded, her eyes cooling. "You're making a dangerous choice, boy." Marcus didn't let go of Evelyn. "So are you." The fog surged forward, the pale shapes pressing closer to the torchlight, but never crossing. Their faces caught the fire in brief flashes, eyes too black, mouths too wide, skin shimmering with a sheen that wasn't sweat. The song pulsed through them in perfect unison, a living heartbeat just beyond the flames. Mrs. Whitlow's voice softened again, but it was no longer warm. It was coaxing, almost hungry. "She can't run forever, and when she falls, they'll take her all at once. What I offer is mercy." Evelyn's head throbbed. The pull in her chest was a constant ache now, her body leaning toward the fire despite every warning screaming inside her. She could hear Daniel in the harmony again, his voice breaking in that way it used to when he laughed too hard. Her voice shook. "Marcus, what if she's right?" His jaw tightened, eyes dark. "Then I'll make sure you never find out." He pulled her back a step from the circle, but the moment their weight shifted, the figures in the fog began to move. Slow, deliberate, their swaying turning into a forward glide. The song swelled, pressing against the torches like a tide against rock. Mrs. Whitlow's gaze slid past them, toward the shadows. "Ah, looks like time's up." The first shape pressed against the torchlight's edge, the flames bowing outward under the pressure. The air grew thick, heavy, wet. Marcus gritted his teeth. "Evie, run." But Evelyn couldn't move, because from the gap between two of the shapes, her mother stepped forward. This time there was no distortion in her voice at all. "Come with me, sweetheart. I promise you'll be safe." Evelyn's legs wavered under her. Her mother's voice was like warm sunlight breaking through cold water, chasing away every ache, every shiver. Marcus stepped in front of her, blocking the view. "It's not her." But the voice didn't falter. "Yes, it is, Evie. Look at me. I'm right here." The urge to see her was overwhelming. Evelyn craned her neck, catching a glimpse over Marcus's shoulder. There she was, her mother. Hair loose, face just as she remembered before grief had settled into it. No strange smile, no unnatural tilt of the head. Just Mom. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision. "She looks real." "She isn't," Marcus snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. Mrs. Whitlow's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "And what if she is? What if you're letting fear steal your last chance?" The pale shapes in the fog pressed harder against the torchlight, the flames guttering. The ring wavered, flickering with each note of the song. Marcus's grip tightened on her arm, pulling her toward the trees. "We have to go, now." But her mother's voice rose above the song. "Please, Evie, I can't hold on much longer. If you leave now, you'll never find me again." The world tilted. The pull in Evelyn's chest surged, her feet stumbling toward the fire without thought. Marcus swore under his breath, stepping into her path. "I'll carry you if I have to." She looked up at him, her voice barely audible. "If I go and it really is her, I'll be with my family again. And if it's not?" His eyes were fierce, unyielding. "Then you're gone, and I'm alone." The torchlight sputtered, one flame dying completely. The shadows surged forward like water, breaking through a dam. Mrs. Whitlow's voice dropped to a whisper. "Choose." Her mother's voice, clear, breaking with emotion, whispered in her other ear, "Come home." And for the first time, Evelyn realized she wasn't sure which voice she believed. The clearing seemed to shrink around her. Torchlight and fog pressed close together until there was no space between. the warmth and cold battling on her skin. Every sound, Marcus's ragged breath, her mother's plea, the hiss of the failing flames, blurred into a single thundering pulse in her ears. Marcus's hand was still on her arm, but her body swayed toward the circle as though pulled by a tide. The weight in her chest throbbed in rhythm with the song, each beat louder, harder to resist. "I can't," she whispered. "You can," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "You just have to keep your feet on this side." Her mother's silhouette stepped closer to the dying flame, close enough for the light to soften the features. Evelyn could see the tiny scar on her cheek from the time she'd slipped in the garden, the faint shadow under her eyes that no photograph had ever captured. It was perfect. Too perfect. Mrs. Whitlow's smile was calm, patient. "She's right there, child. One step and the pain stops." The shapes in the fee had stopped pressing forward, their swaying slowing to match the beat of the song. Watching, waiting. Marcus moved closer to Evelyn's ear, his whisper rough. "If you step in, I won't come after you. I can't." Her breath caught. "Why not?" His eyes locked on hers, and for a moment she saw something raw there. Fear, yes, but something else too. Guilt. "Because I almost didn't leave when it called me." The admission punched the air from her lungs. "What?" His grip tightened. "I know exactly how it feels, Evie. And I know exactly what it takes from you when you say yes." One of the torches guttered out, plunging part of the circle into shadow. The pale shapes leaned in, their forms barely held back by the remaining fire. Her mother's voice trembled. "Evelyn, please." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Choose me, or choose it. But you can't choose both." Evelyn's heart pounded so hard it hurt. The air in the clearing felt charged, like a storm was about to break. If she moved an inch, lightning would strike. Her mother's face was so close now she could almost feel the warmth of her breath. "I'm right here, sweetheart. One step." Marcus's grip on her arm was unshakable, but his voice was shaking. "Evie, please." The song shifted, growing softer, sweeter. It didn't push anymore, it invited, promised. It spoke through the faces in the fog, through Mrs. Whitlow's watchful gaze, through the woman who looked like her mother. The pull inside her chest surged so strongly she gasped, her knees giving slightly. She didn't know if she'd moved forward or if the circle had reached for her. The last two torches nearest her sputtered, their flames shrinking. The boundary was collapsing. The pale shapes leaned closer, their heads tilting in unison. Marcus's voice broke through the haze. "If you cross that line, you're gone, and I'll lose you like I've lost everyone else." Evelyn's gaze snapped to him. "Everyone else?" His eyes were glassy, his jaw tight. "I brought people here before. Thought I could keep them safe. I couldn't." The admission sliced through her. For a moment, the pull wavered. Mrs. Whitlow's tone sharpened. "Don't let his guilt be your burden. Take the mercy you're offered." The final torch nearest her guttered, the flames snapping out with a hiss. Fog poured through the gap like a living thing, curling at her ankles. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low and desperate. "Evie, now or never, choose." Her mother reached for her, palm up, eyes full of tears. The fog behind her mother swelled, and for the first time Evelyn thought she saw something else moving inside it. Something vast, shifting, waiting. The thing in the fog loomed just beyond her mother's shape, its outline impossible to hold in her mind. Too many limbs, or maybe none at all, shifting with every blink. The air seemed to warp around it, bending the torchlight, making the fire shrink from its presence. Her mother didn't seem to notice. She kept her hand outstretched, her voice steady and pleading. "Sweetheart, please, before it's too late." Marcus stepped in front of Evelyn, blocking her view. It's already too late if you step forward. Mrs. Whitlow's voice cut through the song, clear and certain. She's marked. You can't keep her, but you can let her choose her way out. Evelyn's chest tightened. What if she's telling the truth? What if this thing behind her doesn't matter? What if it's just background? Marcus turned, his expression fierce. It's not background, that's the hollow itself. And once you're inside with it, there's no peace to bargain with. It takes everything. The shapes in the fog began to hum, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the ground beneath her feet. The last torches flared weakly, the flames licking low, guttering with each pulse of sound. Mrs. Whitlow's smile was gone now, her face sharp in the flickering light. One step, Evelyn, or let them take you the hard way. They will. Marcus's hand found hers again, squeezing so tight it almost hurt. I won't let them. Her mother's voice softened to a whisper. But I will love you. The pull in her chest became unbearable, a tether stretched to its breaking point. Her vision swam, and for a moment, she thought she saw herself already inside the fog, standing still, hands limp at her sides, eyes closed. The thing behind her wrapping around her like it was claiming something it had always owned. Marcus's voice was in her ear. Decide, Evie. Right now. Her mother's hand was still there. The fog behind her was still moving, and the last torch hissed and went out. The darkness that followed was total. No firelight, no stars, just the faint glow of the fog curling in from all sides. The cold hit first, sinking straight into Evelyn's bones, followed by the smell. Wet earth, rust, and something older, almost sweet in its rot. The song swelled in the black, no longer gentle. It was a tide surging forward, pressing into her ears, her lungs, her heartbeat. Every voice in it, her mother's, Daniel's, strangers she'd never met, called her name in perfect unison. Shapes emerged in the fog, moving closer without the fire to hold them back. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Mrs. Whitlow stepped toward her, the smile back on her face, soft and knowing. Now you don't have to choose. It will choose for you. Marcus yanked Evelyn toward the trees, his hand like a vice on hers. Run! But the fog was already there, curling around her ankles, heavy as water. The first pale shape reached them, a man whose skin sagged like wet paper, his mouth open in a silent hum that matched the song's rhythm. Marcus swung the axe, the blade biting deep into the thing's shoulder. Black water hissed onto the ground, but the man didn't stop. He only stepped closer. More emerged, circling. Some wore faces she knew. Some had none at all. Marcus, she gasped, her voice shaking. We can't outrun them. Yes, we can, he gritted out, but we have to go now. The fog thickened and she saw it again. The vast shape, closer now, so close its edges blurred into everything around it. A pressure built in her chest, not just pulling her forward, but down, like something beneath the earth was dragging at her. Her mother's voice was suddenly in her ear, so near she could feel the breath on her skin. It's all right, Evie. Let go. Marcus jerked her forward, breaking the contact. Don't listen. But the next moment, the ground under her feet shifted, softening, sinking, until she realized with horror they were standing in water that hadn't been there seconds ago, and it was rising. The water was black, thick, and cold enough to burn. It climbed to her calves in seconds, each step heavier than the last. Ripples spread out from where she and Marcus struggled, but the shapes in the fog glided through it effortlessly, their movements smooth and silent. Evelyn gasped as the icy current tugged at her ankles, not pulling toward the trees, but toward the center of the clearing. Toward it. Marcus fought forward, dragging her with him. Keep moving. Her breath came fast and shallow, panic biting into her ribs. Marcus, it's... She froze mid-sentence. Because her mother was standing in the water ahead of them now, her dress floating around her knees, hair streaming behind her like she was underwater even though her head was above. She was smiling the same way she used to when Evelyn came home from school. The pull in Evelyn's chest became a sharp, almost painful hook. "Evie," her mother held out her arms, "you're so tired. Let me take it from you." Marcus put himself between them. "She's not real." But Evelyn's legs locked, the water now halfway to her thighs, so cold it made her skin ache. "She feels real." The song built again, low and rolling, like the deep rumble before a wave crashes. The surface of the water shimmered, distorting the shapes of the pale figures, until they looked impossibly tall, their faces elongated and smooth. Marcus gripped her wrist hard. "If we stop now, we don't leave. Do you understand? We don't leave." The current pulled harder, dragging her toward the center. She realized with horror that the water didn't ripple from their movements alone. It was breathing. Each inhale sucked them deeper. Mrs. Whitlow's voice floated across the clearing. "Better to sink into it willingly than be dragged." And for the first time, Evelyn wasn't sure which would be worse. The water crept higher, numbing her legs until she couldn't tell if she was still moving them. Each breath felt heavier, as though the cold was filling her lungs from the inside. Marcus tightened his grip, half hauling her toward the tree line. Almost there. Just. The current surged, yanking them both off balance. Evelyn's scream was cut short as icy water slammed over her shoulders, into her mouth, her nose. For a second she was under, eyes open, seeing nothing but black, feeling something vast shifting in the depths below her. Marcus's hand wrenched her upward, and she broke the surface with a gasp, coughing hard. The water was now at their chests. Through the fee, her mother glided closer, untouched by the pull. "Sweetheart, it's all right. Just stop fighting. Let it hold you." Evelyn's teeth chattered. "It feels like it wants me." "It does," Marcus snapped, "and that's exactly why you keep moving." Shapes began to rise around them, half-submerged forms with skin so pale it reflected the dim glow of the fog. Their mouths opened in unison, releasing streams of that black water back into the current, as if feeding it. The pull from below grew stronger, and Evelyn's feet slipped on something soft, too soft on the bottom. Her stomach turned as she realized she was stepping on hair, long strands floating up to tangle around her calves. Mrs. Whitlow's voice drifted closer, though Evelyn couldn't see her now. "It will keep you, forever. No more running, no more fear." Marcus shoved forward, his strength the only thing keeping them from sliding back toward the center. His voice was raw. "Evie, whatever you do, don't look down." But she did, and in the wavering darkness below, dozens of pale faces stared up at her from the depths, their eyes wide and unblinking, their mouths opening in silent welcome. The sight locked her in place. Those faces, some bloated, some skeletal, were all looking straight at her, their hair drifting like weeds in a slow current. Mouths moved without sound, shaping her name over and over. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The pull was no longer just in her chest. It wrapped around her ankles, her wrists, curling into her ribs like it was threading itself through her bones. "Evie!" Marcus's voice was sharp, ragged. She felt his grip slip for half a heartbeat, and in that moment the faces below surged upward, closing the distance between them and the surface. The current's drag became a downward yank, like invisible hands clamping around her legs. Marcus grabbed her under the arms and hauled, nearly lifting her clear of the water. "Look at me." "Not at them." She tore her gaze away from the shifting white below, meeting his eyes. His expression was fierce, but she could see the strain in his jaw, the way his body shook against the pull. The song rose again, but now it wasn't distant. It was inside her head, behind her teeth, a vibration deep in her skull. She could pick out her mother's voice, Daniel's voice, dozens of others, weaving through it like threads in a net. And then, clearer than all the rest, her own voice joined in. It startled her so badly she lost her balance, slipping under again. This time, the faces were right there beneath her, no more than an arm's length away. She could see the tiny bubbles trailing from their lips, the way their eyes darted over her features, as though memorizing them. One reached out a pale, webbed hand, not to grab, just to touch. And before Marcus yanked her back up, Evelyn realized she'd been about to reach back. The air above the surface felt too thin, too sharp in her lungs. Evelyn coughed violently, black water spilling from her mouth in hot bursts, though she'd only swallowed the freezing current moments ago. Her throat burned. Marcus was still dragging her forward, each step a battle against the suction below. The water had stopped rising, but hadn't lessened its grip. It clung like something alive, pulling at every inch of her. Behind them, the fog was thicker, shapes gliding closer. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Her mother's voice came again, impossibly close, as though whispering directly into her ear. "Sweetheart, it's easier if you just let it have you." Evelyn's heart jolted painfully. "If it takes me, will I see you?" she whispered, almost without meaning to. Marcus's head snapped toward her. "Evie, no." The voices in the song seemed to swell in answer to her question, a harmony so sweet and aching it felt like it could crack her open. Her legs slowed, the pull from below matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. Marcus tightened his grip on her wrist, nearly lifting her out of the water to break her stride. "Don't listen, you hear me? You don't listen." Something brushed her calf. Fingers, unmistakably human, curling just enough to make her skin crawl. Then another, this time at her ankle. The touch wasn't violent, it was coaxing, guiding, pulling her gently back toward the center. Marcus saw her falter and moved in front of her, forcing her to look at him. "They want you calm. They want you willing. That's when they take everything." The current surged again, stronger, and Evelyn's footing vanished. She slipped under, but Marcus went with her, still gripping her hand like a lifeline. Under the water, the darkness was deeper than before, so deep it felt endless. The vast shape was there, closer now, its presence a weight pressing against her ribs. And then it opened its eyes. The eyes weren't like anything human. No pupils, no wides, just two vast orbs the color of deep-sea light, glowing faintly in the black. They didn't blink. They didn't need to. The moment they fixed on her, the pull in Evelyn's chest became unbearable, a hook sinking in and yanking hard. Her limbs went slack, and for an instant, she felt herself drifting toward it, slow but inevitable. The thing's size was impossible to grasp. Its edges bled into the darkness like the fog above, its form shifting so much she couldn't tell if it had a body or was the water itself. But those eyes never moved from her. She heard nothing now, not Marcus, not her mother, just the steady hum of the hollow's voice inside her head. "I have been waiting." A shiver tore through her, even underwater. "For me?" she thought, and the moment the words formed, the answer came, wrapped in that same impossible voice. "You have always been mine." The water between them shortened. She could see other faces now, those same pale figures, woven into the hollow's form, their eyes dull but mouths curved into faint smiles. Then Marcus slammed into her side, knocking the breath from her chest. His hand clamped around her wrist, dragging her upward. Her ears popped painfully as they broke the surface again. She coughed, gasping for air. "It saw me," she rasped. Marcus's expression was grim. "Yeah, and now it won't stop." The water around them began to swirl, the current no longer pulling only down but in tight, spiraling circles. The shapes in the fog waded closer, their movements matching the rhythm of the vortex. Mrs. Whitlow's voice floated over the chaos, calm and certain. "It doesn't matter where you run now. You belong to it," Marcus growled, forcing them toward the tree line. "Not yet, she doesn't." But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that the hollow had been telling the truth, and that she'd just confirmed something it had always known. The vortex tightened, the pull at their legs relentless. Each step toward the trees felt like dragging through wet cement. Marcus's breathing was ragged now, his strength burning out with every heave forward. The shapes in the fog began to circle them, their movements slow and deliberate, like predators in shallow water. Their eyes reflected faint pinpricks of light, catching what little glow the fog offered. Evelyn's legs trembled. "It's not letting us go." Marcus didn't look back. "Then we fight until it does." One of the pale figures broke from the circle and moved toward them, cutting through the water with smooth, serpentine strides. Its mouth was open, not wide, but just enough to reveal a thin stream of black water trickling from its lips into the current. Marcus swung the axe with one arm while holding Evelyn with the other. The blade sank into the figure's side, but instead of recoiling, it stepped closer. Its hand rose, fingers splayed, reaching for Evelyn's face. She jerked back, heart pounding. "Marcus!" Before the thing could touch her, a voice like thunder rolled through the water. Not aloud, but inside her skull. "Do not harm what is mine." The figure froze mid-step. Evelyn's breath caught, a chill cutting through the cold already in her bones. That voice, deep, patient, endless, was the same she'd heard in the depths. The hollow wasn't speaking to her this time. It was speaking to Marcus. The shapes in the fog drew back slightly, their circling slowing. The water stilled just enough for the current's pull to feel deliberate. Marcus's eyes darted around, his grip tightening painfully on her wrist. "It's watching." The voice came again, softer but sharper, like the edge of a blade. "Leave her, and you may go." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Oh God, it's bargaining with you." Marcus didn't answer. His jaw clenched so hard it looked like it hurt. The hollow spoke once more. "She is mine. You are not," and for the first time since the water began to rise, Marcus hesitated. Marcus